But the animal rights activists say there has to be a better way to accomplish the same goal, that animals don't belong in research laboratories. There is very little compromise in this issue, an issue that is very divisive and sometimes destructive. Tonight at 6, we're going to begin a two-part series looking at the animal rights movement that's now 10 years old.
Transplants and many other medical advances were made possible by research done with animals. That animal research is causing a rift between the science community and animal activists. And Medical Beat reporter Denise Boyer joins us now with a closer look at that issue, and it is a real issue.
And a real controversy. I think it's real important here, Charlie, that we set the stage a little bit. As medical reporter for this station, it has become more and more difficult to do certain stories. Usually the stories involving experimental research or studies that are underway because researchers won't let me into their laboratories. Duke Medical Center now has a policy, in fact, that television cameras are not allowed inside labs where they are performing animal research. Researchers don't want their laboratories exposed for fear of being exploited by the media, but also the animal rights activists. It's a 10-year-old movement. What has happened over the last 10 years? Well, first, let's set the stage. A few months ago, Christy Rose was days away from death. Cystic fibrosis was suffocating her, starving her of air. You can see the results after a successful double lung transplant. Her friend Misty Fisher now waits for her chance.
Well, I feel like animals have saved my life, because if they didn't do transplants on the animals first, they would have never developed this technique.
The surgical techniques for lung transplantation were initially developed and the skills honed in animal models. You could not do lung transplantation in human beings without first doing it in animals.
NC State philosophy professor and animal rights activist Tom Regan says we need to move away from animal research, look for alternatives.
We encourage the surgeon to learn to heal by learning to kill.
And People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, has put together a convincing campaign. These shocking tapes circulate the country in an effort to accelerate momentum for the animal rights movement.
And we're afraid that animals are being used for profit, which is our main concern. No, we don't want animals used at all. But until that point can come, we want alleviation of a lot of useless research.
And the heavy blows of the animal rights movement are aimed at medical research. The issue has become more than rights, it's animal equality.
Other animals are equal to us in the sense that they have a life of their own that's of importance to them, of value to them, apart from any usefulness they have to us.
But biomedical researchers say, frankly, people are more important than animals.
Is it ethical to do something in a human before you've taken every conceivable measure, every reasonable measure to reduce the risk to that human and to enhance the possibility of success in that human being?
And what I'm not seeing in this area, for example, are those visionary scientists who are willing to say, we can do better. We can investigate and try to find ways of finding out what we want to find out without using animals.
Dr. Malin Coetzee is one of those visionary scientists. He is using computers that will replace some animals in the laboratory.
It means that the people that do the animal research use only the minimum number of animals. For example, you might be able to reduce the number of animals used or reduce the number of kinds of experiments that are done. In other words, it directs the experiment to get the very best and most useful data.
The issue isn't just reducing the number of animals in research. It's not just doing away with cruelty. The animal rights movement is the philosophy that all animals should be released from the laboratory. As Tom Regan put it, we don't want larger cages, we want empty cages. Researchers say it will never happen, that people can't become guinea pigs, and medical students need practice with living organs and tissues to truly learn their profession. However, there is a new era in medicine unfolding. The animal rights movement is having an impact, and tomorrow night we're going to look at that impact, both constructive and destructive.
Denise, thank you very much. A state house committee approved a bill that would send offenders to prison for interfering with research. Anyone who releases animals carrying infectious diseases could face felony charges. And tonight, our medical beat reporter, Denise Boyer, continues her series on animal research and the impact the animal rights movement has on research in medicine.
Well, it's interesting, Charlie, that state lawmakers are looking at a bill that would essentially protect researchers and their work. Research universities in this area have already installed security systems, guards, and locked up laboratories for fear of retaliation from the animal rights movement. We found a Greensboro professor who has had his life threatened.
You will see your brain and your wife's brain will be drilled and burned like you were doing to our lovely animals.
Someone involved with the animal rights movement sent that twisted letter to researcher Walter Salinger. He says they get worse. Salinger is the target of this group, the North Carolina Network for Animals. The group holds regular vigils outside his research office on the UNC Greensboro campus.
We do not believe it's right to use animals and exploit animals for our own benefit.
Salinger is doing research on the brain function of cats, but getting into his laboratory is challenging.
You don't need to be filling those numbers, do you?
We made it to the laboratory, but that's as far as we got.
Where are the animals?
They're in the animal quarters.
Can we see them?
Yeah, but I don't want your camera.
Why not?
It's impossible to produce, in the first place, it's impossible to produce a sympathetic shot of animals in a cage.
But we want to just be realistic.
I understand.
We don't necessarily need a pet shop sort of a...
I understand, but it adds fuel to the fire.
I was able to see the cats, but our camera and you can't. And neither can Beth Gentry, who says Salinger's work is cruel.
Whether you want to call it torture or not, when I see an animal suffering in a laboratory, that's torture to me.
But you haven't seen his animals suffering in the laboratory.
No, I haven't, but you can look at the pictures of animals who are in the same type of procedures that his cats are in, and there is pain and suffering.
One of the publicity pieces says that I keep these cats on the operating table for a week without food and water.
Do you?
No, they have my detailed research protocols. The university's handed it, which spells out what I do and under what circumstances. So
Is there somebody there that can make sure that you're following that protocol?
I have, my work is supervised by an institutional animal care and use committee.
The animal rights movement has launched an assault against the use of animals in medical research. That concerns me.
Former U.S. Surgeon General Koop has put together public service announcements defending animal research. But even he admits the movement has brought positive changes.
I would say that it has alerted everyone to be frugal in the use of animals, to be kind in the use of animals.
Like this UNC primate lab, monkeys now get TV privileges, usually documentaries or Mr. Rogers. The changes go beyond the lab. Consumers are finding more cruelty-free products that have not been tested on animals. That's because there are alternatives.
We now have the ability, through technological progress that we've had in the last 10 years, to actually clone human skin cells and to extrapolate what will happen with a human cell to what may happen in the human eye.
Medical researchers want those alternatives to using animals. That's because animals are too time-consuming, too controversial, and costly.
Well, it's not just a matter of cost. I mean, there are no alternatives to the use of animals in much of biomedical research.
We do.
Researchers say that's changing. One day, laboratories will be filled with computers instead of cages. And the animal rights movement can take credit for that. In the last 10 years, research institutes have drawn up different and sometimes stiffer policies for animal research, and fewer animals are being used and more are being protected. Animals used in testing cosmetics have been cut down to about 10% of what it was a decade ago. And Charlie, I would like to mention too that the destructive tactics that you saw in the story against Walter Salinger, the animal rights movement says that is pretty much the extreme, that is not the middle ground or the majority of the animal rights movement. But as Tom Regan put it, who is a local animal rights activist known nationally, he said sometimes it takes the extremes to move the middle, and there is certainly a movement within the middle in this issue.
Thank you very much, Denise. Appreciate it.